in-person session of our 30th General Chapter. We continue to thank God that all of you arrived safely and tested negative since you have been here, and that we are able to gather face-to-face after almost 2 years of not being able to do so. We can now enjoy looking at each other. Yes, looking at each other as masked women, and somewhat socially distanced, but still much closer together than through Zoom. Before proceeding, I wish to thank each one of you and all of our sisters in the congregation for living this time of the great unknown during our pandemic. You lived it with deep faith in God and in us as your General Council, and we thank you. At times, due to the pandemic and the many restrictions, we wondered if today would actually happen. That is, all of us gathering in one place for this General Chapter. Your prayers and those of the many other people all of us have asked to pray that this in-person chapter happen have been answered by our ever-faithful God. May we, in turn, respond by faithfully living these days together. Having our Zoom gatherings from June through October makes today and yesterday a little different than the first days of our past General Chapters. Those of you who have been at General Chapters before, remember when we came in on the first day of General Chapter in the past, we did not know a good number of our sisters. But as you looked around the dining room yesterday and the chapel this morning, there really were very few unknown faces. Because you have all been present with each other in the Zoom plenary assemblies, and also with each other, not with everyone certainly, but in the small group sessions. Our two facilitators are very familiar to you because you have seen them guiding us through these days, these months. The difference, at least for me now, is that in person, we can feel the energy, the enthusiasm, the hope and joy radiating from one another. Our charism calls us to be relational. Our charism is nudging us to get to know more about one another during the breaks and in your new groups. To sense the passion that the others have regarding certain issues. And to come to understand better what feeds the other sisters' hope and spirit. This is a sacred and important part of this chapter journey, so treasure it. The General Council said that if we are not in person, we lose out so much on this part that I just spoke of, this important treasure of coming to know each other's spirit and hopes and dreams and passions. Thank you for participating so beautifully in this morning's opening ritual. The opening ritual gave us the opportunity to surround ourselves literally with the General Chapter logo and its vibrant colors and creative diversity as we, all of us, in essence, filled in the faces of the three women in our logo. As you recall, there's no face on them. So you filled in the faces. Their faces reflected where we are currently present to our dear neighbors. and where we are called to move to new areas of need on that colorful spectrum. And as we saw with the grapes and the bread and the candles, daily we move in and out from that center, from our center, rooted in our triune God, rooted in Eucharist, and supported and nurtured by the many ways we as women break bread together. Today, Regina Celia broke a huge loaf of bread. We, all of us, the congregation, those of us present, we are Eucharist for one another as a community, as a congregation. Yes, we are already women immersed in the Spirit and connected to the world. But as we have seen from our sisters in their evaluations, their responses to the various pre-chapter reflections, and in their hopes, and in our own Zoom sessions, we really desire to be more deeply rooted in the Spirit, and to be open to new and more intimate connections with our world. As a congregation, we prayed at the end of August with the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. All the provinces have been praying with it in different ways prior to them. And we have repeated our hope to be like the Good Samaritan, to bend down low. To bend down low and touch the wounds of our dear neighbors. This bending down low is one example of a more intimate connection. Sharing our own vulnerability with those most vulnerable in our world. This idea of bending low to touch the wounds of another is not easy for any of us. It involves slowing ourselves down and stretching our muscles to reach the other in order for us to assist them, to be with them in their wounds. And it causes us, at the same time, to feel or be reminded of our own wounds, our own insufficiencies. In hindsight, we might be able to say, oh, what a graced moment that was when I helped an injured person. In hindsight. But as we are in the process of bending and touching the other's wounds, we feel humbled. Yes, but we may also feel conflicted and inept. We may be wondering if I can really help this person. Can I actually look at her wounds and be changed by them? But even as we ponder this, we are filled with the grace to do so. It is amazing, amazing what God can do with us when we are so open to another. We come to this chapter as women called to be vulnerable in our manifold search for which wounds of the world the Spirit is calling us to touch. Which new connections we are called to make. And how we can actually be more deeply immersed in the Spirit. Chapters are a time to dream together, to listen to one another's hopes and ideas, to use our imaginations, allowing ourselves to see new paintings being depicted, new paintings of our path, of the horizon, of our future. We are a community of women desiring to build the dreams we hold. Pope Francis speaks of dreams in Fratelli Tutti. Quote, "Here we have a splendid secret that shows us how to dream and turn our life into a wonderful adventure. No one can face life in isolation. We need a community that supports and helps us, in which we can help one another keep looking ahead." How important it is to dream together. By ourselves, we risk seeing mirages. By ourselves, we risk seeing mirages. Seeing things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. End quote. Pope Francis speaks of isolation, and we have known this more so in these past 2 years probably than ever before in our lives. What we have learned from this experience of the pandemic is key for us. This communitarian method that Pope Francis speaks about, of living our dreams, helps us see how we can do it. And it is artistically revealed in our logo and in our theme of immersion and connection. What dreams have we already seen depicted in our discussions, questions, and priorities these 5 months of our Zoom sessions? What dreams have we already shared? What paintings have we already seen in those 5 months? Just take a moment and recall some of the dreams that you listened to in the small groups. Those dreams that were shared are colorful, like our logo, and are full of the diverse movements of hope, commitment, change, of letting go, listening, openness, and compassion. They are dreams whose goal is to improve the lives of others, to show others the respect and love they are due as part of God's image and God's creation. In the book, Let Us Dream, A Path to a Better Future, Pope Francis speaks about times of crisis and the focus and energy that erupts within us when crisis touches us, as in the recent pandemic. The 4 of us saw how all of you and our sisters throughout the congregation tapped into both physical and emotional energy you may not have known you had, in order for you to meet the drastic changes in your daily life during the pandemic. This energy included how you reached out to those in need in creative ways and with greater generosity. Such a crisis, as we have all experienced, also causes us to look at our lives and evaluate what is really important, what is really essential. That was good preparation for the chapter, because at chapters we look at what is really important, what is really essential. In his book, Pope Francis reminds us there are many other viruses in our world, not just COVID. The pandemics of hunger, the pandemic of homelessness, the pandemic of violence and forced migration, and climate change, just to name a few. Like COVID-19, being aware of these viruses have had some impact on our daily choices and agendas, but certainly has not had enough impact, and not to the same extent, because for the most part, we did not personally nor physically experience these other pandemics ourselves. We have not been homeless. We have not gone hungry. We have not experienced forced migration. Yes, we have experienced some of the climate changes that are impacting our Earth. Today and throughout these weeks together, this is a moment to dream big, to rethink our priorities, what we value, what we want, what we seek, and to commit to act in our daily life on what we have dreamed of. These last words are not my words. They are the words of Pope Francis, but they could be my words to you. They could be your words to me. They could be the words of your dreams, our dreams, words we have said perhaps before in chapter, to think big, to dream about new priorities, to see what we value. That is what chapter is about. This chapter is not a crisis moment for us as Pope Francis speaks of. Rather, it's a sacred moment, when we as a congregation will either choose to live these words, to dream big, to change our priorities, and to be more fully engaged in these other pandemics. That's one choice. Or we will choose to walk the same journey as the priest and the Levite in the parable of the Good Samaritan, to walk away. It is our free choice to make, as individuals, as communities, and as one body. How can we best help each other to make the right choice? The choice that reflects our true vocation. The choice that is living our charism. The choice that is being gospel women, and commit to it fully. Since we have been speaking of dreams, I would like to tell you a story. Stories and dreams are similar, usually fun to listen to, and often they hold a message for us, even a pathway to follow. This story may give us the answer to our how can we best help each other. So sit back and listen to a story. Once upon a time, there was a pine tree. Marion, a pine tree. Once upon a time, there was a pine tree. It was old as trees go, piney, well-lined, and scarred from time, and from the heat and the random blows from skies during lightning storms and when this lightning strikes the trees. Each year, the tree made its meaning, its ritual shedding of its needles, because pine trees shed needles, till a thick bed covered its feet and softened its stretching out into the space about it a few fingers at a time. It looked like all the other trees in the mild woods, except for one small thing. In the insides of this tree lived a fox. More and more, with time, the tree wondered what the fox would do for a home when the tree fell due to the weakness of its internal structure. Before that came to pass, the tree decided it had to find a home for its house guest, the fox. Now, there is a tree next door, a tree that lived next door, It was a thin, fragile tree that turned only light green in spring and nearly died each summer. It wasn't suited to housing anyone. It could hardly stand up by itself. But the two trees had been close for years. And one day, the pine tree shared its concern about the fox's home with its thin friend. Now, the tree was thin, but it was young, as trees go, and it was still growing quickly. It hit upon an idea. Why don't I just shift a bit and start growing among your roots, right up alongside your old scar? It will strengthen your base and still leave the fox a place to live for a long time to come. And I might even live a while longer myself, since I do not do well alone when the seasons change and my thin covering begins to crack and tremble. So it was agreed. The young tree crept over, and the old tree leaned to accommodate its nearness to its insides. And the fox was happy too. If you listen, you will hear in the silent woods the secret of the trees. Leaning can make you live forever, and your weakest places can be someone else's home. Leaning can make you live forever, and your weakest places can be someone else's home. Before the story, I asked how we can best help each other. In this story, we see both trees open to the new that will be life-giving for the third character, the fox. The older and larger tree articulates the fox's need for a sturdy home, and the younger, more fragile tree sees a possibility. But both trees had to let go. Both had to move or shift from where they were and be willing to settle in a new earth or a new position of leaning so that the roots could grow. In the process of their own moving and resettling, they created a more permanent home for the fox. At the same time, their leaning towards each other strengthened each of them. They were open to a process of change and all it required. They were transformed and were able to generate life and hope. Leaning on or relying on another is part of what it means to be human. It is part of the ongoing process of growing and developing. Leaning is a reciprocal act, one in which the dynamism of life flows from one to the other. Leaning is a Trinitarian act. Leaning is a Samaritan act. It is what our charism of building communion is all about. Leaning is our mission. It is seen within the design of our logo, in the action of the theme of this chapter, in the action of nurturing the roots so they can grow deeper, building a more solid foundation from which we can reach out further, from which we must stretch and not hold back, making new connections as we walk the pathway toward our future. A foundation from which we can reach out further to stretch and not hold back. We cannot hold back any longer, sisters. making new connections as we walk the pathway toward our future. This pathway is part of the ongoing process of co-creating, and co-creating is part of why we gather in General Chapter. This process includes so much of what we have already been living in the congregation through our collaborative efforts in mission with many other congregations, non-profits, and lay people. Of how we have moved toward intercultural living, the concept, starting to study it, and maybe choosing it at this chapter. And how we are being a presence to the new, unwanted, displaced persons in our society. These are all some of the pathways that must continue, but expand as a new mandate begins. It is like the trees. When the trees in the spring, they already have branches, but new branches stretch out. They do not hold back. That is what life is about if we live in process. Being in process is the dynamism of living fully. What is critical is that we live the process, allowing ourselves to be transformed personally. It's not the end goal. Where we are transformed is within the process. Life is moving rapidly, yes, and we must be attentive and flexible, adapting to the call to put our roots down as the thin tree did in unfamiliar soil. Let us just take a little minute to think of the story and our own calls from God in the past and ask ourselves, is leaning an attitude or a disposition that I choose? Is leaning an attitude or a disposition that I choose in my relationships? Is leaning how I am in my role within my ministry? If so, in what ways do I lean? If not, why not? Sister Elizabeth Johnson, a sister of St. Joseph of Brentwood, New York, and a theologian, offers the following on the topic of transformation and strengthening one another. The quote, "Women know the breakthrough of their own strength, usually under duress or stress. Our strength comes forth. The kind of power women evidence is a vitality, an empowering vigor that reaches out and awakens freedom and strength in oneself and in others. This empowering vigor transforms people and bonds them with one another and to the world. And it operates in a relational manner." When Elizabeth speaks of, what Elizabeth speaks of, is actually what our Charism Alive looks like. Empowering vigor to strengthen others, to bond others together, and to reach out to the needs. What she speaks of is our own history, that a history filled with women of strength and vitality, women who have empowered others to, in turn, touch the wounds of even more people across our globe. Our sisters who make up the Communion of Saints, today there was a banner that was brought up, a sign, 292 sisters have died during these 6 years, as of the day we made the banner. And so our Communion of Saints is made up of women who have walked the same path of vigor. Our sisters alive today, including all of us, and the lay people we are journeying with, are also a sign of strength and vigor, and must continue to live our charism with this empowering vigor of gospel living that can be transformative for others. This is our call. Yes, sisters, if we listen, we will hear not just in the silent woods, but in the silence of this room, we will hear the secret of the trees, our secret. Meaning can make us live forever, and our weakest places can be someone else's home. Can we allow ourselves this gift of transformation during this chapter and going forward? Can we offer our support in this process as a gift to one another? Will we invite lay women and men to join us in this transformative process? Will we let go and offer a space of welcome to our new neighbors in greatest need? Will we be open and free enough to receive a space of welcome from the strangers on the road? I would like to conclude with a verse of a song.
On the journey of the narrow road, and those who've gone before us light the way, cheering on the faithful, encouraging the weary, not a stirring testament to God's sustaining grace.
Thank you, and may Sophia wisdom continue to bless us all.